Greetings, friends and countrymen, and welcome to Conspiracy Corner News. This is Bart Sabrell. Conspiracy Corner News briefly highlights the week's most significant and underreported news events throughout the world, focusing on special preparation for the difficult times ahead for all mankind. And sometimes that difficulty is confusion. When mankind first got together and tried to build a tower to reach the heavens, they were confused. God dispersed them and confused their language. And if you've ever traveled around the world, it can be confusing trying to understand what someone is saying in a different language. And now within our own language, within our own culture, it is difficult to understand. In fact, all the major religions around the world seem to have division. In Judaism, you have the Orthodox and the moderates and the liberals who constantly, arguing with one another. Same thing with the Muslims. You have the Shiites and the Sunnis arguing and killing one another. A lot of the ISIS killings really aren't against Americans or Europeans or Christians. They're against each other. And then you have Christianity. You have Protestants and Catholics and many divisions of that. Well, what we're going to talk about is this upcoming event, if it is an event, September 23rd, 2017, where we have this apparent alignment in the sky. And we have this from Revelation 12, verses 1 and 2. It says here, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered." Now, some people believe that this is the first time this particular alignment has occurred in 7,000 years. That this is the constellation Virgo. That's when it believes the woman is referred to. And the 9 stars are the normal stars of Leo, plus 3 more, these planets. And when they align with the sun and the moon, Jupiter here, that this allegedly only happens once in 7,000 years. Now, a lot of people on the internet, and I know personally some of them who talk about this topic and various topics we'll be discussing today, I don't necessarily agree with them. And sometimes I agree with some of what they say, but not all of it, or none of it at all, or all of it. And I think when it comes to the book of Revelation, there are many people who claim to be experts, and I would say my personal opinion is the more someone claims they know something about it, I would be most skeptical of them first. So I went to this one church, and it was, here's what we believe the second beast to be, the European Union, and if you don't believe that, then you're, not being unified and we'll disfellowship you. Another church I went to, and they said, well, we believe the second beast of Revelation is the United States, but that's, our opinion at this hour, and we're open to other suggestions. To me, that was a great way of looking at it, and I would trust someone who said that more than someone who was adamant. When people say they've got it all figured out, those are the people I would be the most skeptical of. And my belief is that nothing is going to happen on September 23rd, largely because the group of people who believe that there is something going to happen on that date, they believe in something called the pre-tribulation rapture. Now, the pre-tribulation rapture is this belief that there are 2 second comings of Christ, which is not mentioned in the Bible. And that there's going to be some secret return of Christ where the, elect people or the Christians are going to be taken away. Then the tribulation will happen, and then Christ is going to come back a third time, and then the end of the world will come. Well, here's from the Bible. It says it right here in Matthew 24. And it opens up with Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple, which is what was going to happen shortly after his life. It says, "Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to him, showed him the buildings of the temple, and Jesus said to them, 'Do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that should not be thrown down.'" Now, a lot of people divide Revelation into 2 camps. People who believe these events have already happened, such as the destruction of Jerusalem, which was in about 70 AD, or people who believe that these things are yet to happen. And I suggest that maybe it's both. That when one group is so adamant about one or the other, a diamond is multifaceted, God is multifaceted. What if both are true at the same time? That these events were already fulfilled in the time of Jesus and then will be fulfilled again right before his second coming. Again, there are two camps. The book of Revelation is either literal or it's symbolic. Some people believe the two witnesses spoken of in Revelation that are dead for 3.5 days, that those are literal people who are going to prophesy and be murdered, and their bodies are going to be there exactly like Revelation says. Other people think it's symbolic. It's representative of the Old Testament and the New Testament are the two witnesses. I say, what if it's both? I mean, it's like a sphere hanging in front of two people. Half of it is blue, the other half is red. The person on the blue side is totally convinced it's entirely blue. The person on the red side is totally convinced that it's red, and they keep arguing with one another when it's both. What if the things of Revelation occurred in the lifetime of the apostles and will again occur at the end? What if the book of Revelation is symbolic and literal also? And what if it's all these other things as well? Well, let's get back to Jesus' answer when he was asked about this. It said, he sat down on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus' first answer was the following: "Take heed that no one deceives you." Why is this so important? I mean, look at this. Take heed that no one deceives you. That was his answer to, the answer of the pre-trib, post-trib, or whatever about the end of the world. He didn't answer the question initially. He said, make sure that no one deceives you. The reason is because 5 times 5, there's only one right answer, 25. But there's an infinite number of wrong answers, you see? So it is actually easier to be deceived than it is to come upon the truth. Jesus goes on to say, many will come in his name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. Not might, but will deceive many. And he says, you will hear of wars, and here's a good one, and rumors of wars. To me, that's, the North Korea thing. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. And we know there's been about a 10-fold increase in earthquakes in the last 10 years, but these are just the beginning of sorrows. Then he goes on to describe what will happen to them personally. They will be delivered up to be killed. There will be false prophets. And that the gospel of the kingdom must be preached to all the end of the world, and then the end will come. Some people say, well, Jesus could come back at any second. Biblically, that's not really true. Otherwise, God is a liar. God said certain things must happen first before the second coming of Christ. And unless those things have happened, Jesus actually cannot come back at any moment, because that would contradict the word of God. One of the things is that the gospel must be preached to all nations, and then the end will come. And now here's what everyone is talking about, and it is so aptly headed here, the Great Tribulation. Jesus says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. And then he says, those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who's on the housetop not go down to take anything, and him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days. And look at this one's pretty interesting. And pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. So the idea that Jesus changed the Sabbath is nowhere in the Bible, by the way. Little side note here. And he expects people to be keeping the Sabbath until the end of time. That's something you need to look into. Perhaps you can go to sabbathtruth.org and see who, the beast power, the Catholic Church, changed the Sabbath. That's why the fourth commandment begins with remember. Don't be distracted. Anyway, we'll go on to say here in verse 21, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time. That's pretty amazing. Nor ever shall be. For unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then he goes on to talk about other deceptions. If someone says, look, the Christ is there or here, don't believe it. For false Christs and prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand. And then he goes on, there will be, say, if he's out in the desert, which I believe is a Muslim prophecy, or if he's in inner rooms, which is a Jewish prophecy, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Again, it's not going to be a secret. It's not some secret return. It says, as lightning is visible to all, so will be the return of Jesus. Everyone will see it. It will not be a secret. And he uses an example when there's a dead body, vultures gather around. It's pretty obvious. And then here it is that sums it up as clearly as it can be. Immediately after the tribulation. Okay? These are the words of Jesus. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Then the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn him. So when does Christ return? Is it before the tribulation, during the tribulation, or after the tribulation? It's right here. This is Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation. Then the Son of Man will appear in the heaven, and the tribes of the earth will mourn, and so forth. So how did this whole idea of there being a secret, second of three returns of Christ, you can check out this book. It will be linked in the description. Here's an author I know, Michael Snyder. He's done great research, and he talks about the rapture and how people are confused about this and are being basically misled. That's why Jesus said, do not be deceived. Here's another great book about it. That goes into the definition, by the way, of rapture, which means simply to arrive. That's what it means. It just means Jesus' arrival. That is the rapture. And then here's another book called End Time Delusions. I've read this from cover to cover, and it goes into the history of the rapture doctrine. It was invented around 1850 by the Jesuits of the Catholic Church. I mean, this is something that was not taught in the time of Jesus. It was not taught by the apostles. It was not taught for 1800 years after the founding of the church. It's a very new teaching. It's very poetic sounding, and how the wedding of, an Eastern wedding represents, the marriage of Christ to the church, and all that stuff is very poetic, and some of that symbolism, I believe, is true, but it goes into great historic detail how this is a very new teaching that just came about. Why would we in the 21st century claim we know more about the teachings of Christ than the apostles did? The apostles never taught about a secret rapture. Hollywood talks about it, and you're going to trust Hollywood, who does, lie after lie after lie? They're the ones who keep doing these, rapture, movies and whatever. And what's going to happen if most of the Christian world says they're not going to suffer through the tribulation, and then they do? They're going to be mad at God. They're going to fall away from God. So this false teaching, as you can see, will be deception of the devil. It says right here about the return of Christ, of that day and hour, no one knows. Not the angels, and some translations say not the Son either, but only my Father. So no one knows. Jesus doesn't know. The angels of heaven don't know. The Son doesn't know. But only God knows. So how can people say Jesus is coming back on September 23rd when the Bible clearly says that no one knows? So how could someone on the internet know if Jesus doesn't even know? And then it says again, immediately after the tribulation, that will be when Jesus will come. So, so what does September 23rd mean? If it means something. Let's take a look at that alignment. Let's just say that they're true. Some say that this alignment is not, special. Some say that it is. I don't know. We're going to talk in a minute to Gill Broussard of Planet 7X X.net, and he's going to give us his opinion. He's an astronomer. I'm not. And he's going to go into what he believes is the significance or lack of this particular teaching that's going around the internet. Now, one thing that you might notice recently with this great solar eclipse, the first one that was only viewable in the United States since 1776, which was the beginning of our country, and the next time a solar eclipse was only visible in the United States was just last month on the 21st. You can see from the path of that eclipse, it divided the country in two, and then about 7 years from now, another eclipse will divide the country in two, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then here, pretty much right in the middle of where that X is the New Madrid fault line, which if it went off, it would literally divide the country in two because the Great Lakes would flood the Mississippi River, and all those bridges and everything would, again, divide the country in two. As you can see, the path of these eclipses do. So my personal opinion about this alleged alignment, if it means anything, because the rapture is not true, there's no pre-tribulation rapture. It says right here, immediately after the tribulation, Jesus will come. Maybe, quite possibly, it means just the beginning of the tribulation period. The idea that it's 7 years isn't exactly biblical either, even though 7 is a biblical number. The more accurate interpretation of the length of the Great Tribulation is 3.5 years. So we're going to have Gill Broussard on here in just a minute, and we're going to talk about this. Here's his website. Again, this will be linked, planet7x.net. And he goes into great detail about Planet X. Now, this is really the second part of Revelation here. That scripture here that we read was Revelation 12, 1 through 3. But let's go ahead and read what it says after that, which a lot of people fail to do. It says here, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Now here's the interesting part to me. Then another sign appeared in heaven. Now this word for sign is the same one that God uses in Genesis 1 when he talks about he made the constellations as signs for the feast days and things like that. And it was also used in Job for an alignment of Orion and things like that. So the idea that a sign is a constellation alignment is valid. But what after this alignment occurs, and let's just say that it is happening on September 23rd, it says that another something in heaven, sign appeared, with an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its head. Now, I've been studying Planet X, which is a rogue planet, for about 15 years now. And if you want to take a quick look as to whether or not something like this is valid, here's a story from CNN.
There is a huge, hidden, heavenly body right here in our solar system. Evidence is mounting that either a brown dwarf star or a gas giant planet is lurking at the outermost reaches of our solar system, far beyond the planet Pluto. According to the British newspaper The Independent, the object is 4 times the size of Jupiter. Experts say the presence of such a massive object could explain why a barrage of comets has been coming from that direction. Well,
now, I've been studying space travel and planets and things like that most of my life. I'm kind of fascinated with that type of stuff. And normally, comets and asteroids are predicted decades in advance, and at least years in advance. And in the last 5 years or so, there have been numerous comets and numerous asteroids that were only discovered a month, a week, or sometimes days in advance. And here the CNN reporter says, well, it's because of Planet X, that Planet X is somehow moving through the solar system, and it is disturbing objects first in the Kuiper Belt and then eventually the asteroid belt as it makes its way toward Earth. Here's a story from 1983. It says, clues are getting warm in the search for Planet X. They launched an infrared satellite and to track down, here it is, the infrared satellite was put into orbit to track down Planet X. Here we have it, more recent story from 2015 that scientists say there may be 2 Planet X's. And this is pretty interesting because one they say is, way outside beyond Pluto, and Gill Broussard says, that's not the one he's talking about, because here it says they have found 2 of them, and that's very, rarely reported. So let's go ahead and get Gill Broussard on here from Planet 7X, and he'll give us his opinion of what's going on. Well, Gill Broussard, welcome on board Conspiracy Corner News. How you doing today?
Oh, great, Bart. Glad to be with you.
You and I have known each other, I guess, 3 or 4 years now. I've been researching Planet X or Planet 7X for, I guess, going on 15 years. And, of course, of all the potential researchers out there, astronomers, while I think it's difficult for anybody to understand end times and Revelation completely, my opinion is you've got the best grasp of it than anyone I've talked to. So that's why I've contacted you today to get your opinion about this alleged alignment happening on Saturday, September 23rd. What's your opinion about all that?
Actually, to me, it's according to the data that I've accumulated over the years, that falls within the wrong months, and the sign is actually, it actually says that, he was he's showing you a sign in heaven. Well, you can't see it in the daytime sky. The time that any daytime skies that he shows you an event pertaining to a star, it's with the eclipse, and according to this pattern that this planet has passed through, it wouldn't be far enough away from the sun or close enough to Earth for it to cause an eclipse during the month of September. So none of the data lines up with what's existing for it to be a September event. This is clearly, and it's indicated in the biblical and as well as the Asian astronomers. All of the data points to a March-April event where Virgo is in the nighttime skies there. So they're using actually the occult version of this. The occult uses the daytime skies, and they use charts to predict this. This is not the biblical way of looking at this, nor is it the scientific way.
So basically what you're saying is this alignment that is happening on September 23rd, 2017 is happening, but you can only see it through a computer model. You can actually see it with your eye at night because the alignment takes place during the day. And for it to be a biblical significance, God would want you to see it with your own eye without the aid of equipment. Is that right?
Correct. Just like the time of, we have a Nebra disk, which gives us the exact model that Joseph of Egypt saw. And it was in the daytime sky, but that was during the eclipse. All right. And this object is what caused the eclipse, but it was not in September. All right. So the Nebra disk, let's see here, gives you an actual date of 1794 BC, April 6. See, we can date 4 biblical events to the exact date that they happen, because we have artifacts. One from the Germans, which is the Nebra disk. We have one that's a Egyptian artifact that gives us, let's see, the date of Job. We have a artifact from Nineveh, which gives us the 40-day call out for Job when he was warning them. That was February 17th. And 40 days later, it lands in the month of Passover, which is either March, April event. And then we also have Haggai, which was a December 21st, 336 BC, when he gave the warning to Israel, which was before, this is when it was just a star in the sky, and it was a nighttime event.
So is this event, this alignment of Virgo, the Virgin, that's being kind of poetically described in Revelation 12:1 and 2, is that happening in the nighttime sky in the near future?
Yes, there's not the way that they say, because that's not in the text. When the moon is at the foot of Virgo, there's 2 more dates in the future that will happen, which is 2020 and 2021. It is my personal opinion that from that eclipse we saw in August, 40 days after that, which lands on roughly the Day of Atonement, which we're coming up to, I believe that this will usher in the 7-year drought, which is associated with this planet whenever it approaches Earth. 7-year drought is common whenever it comes, and the planet crosses Earth's path mid of that drought. So 3.5 years into this global drought is when this object would pass. That would bring us around the March-April event of 2021, possibly. Remember, we have to see the approach to better confirm this. And plus, keep in mind this September 23rd, you're talking about seal 6, okay? Well, that means seal 3, 4, and 5 has to happen before, plus the great falling away before Yeshua appears. Well, none of that has happened yet. So we still have those seals that have to happen before you see seal 6 happen. Okay? So it appears to be, as again, this is following Jacob's trouble. And you read Jacob's story. Jacob worked for his father for 20 years. And from 2021, where Esau declared war against Jacob, Jews and Christians, you count 20 years later, and it brings you roughly to 2021 on a Hebrew calendar, March, April of 2021. And it just so happens that the moon would be at the foot of Virgo, and we have a very good chance of a global drought starting roughly around in the next few weeks. We should, maybe the beginning of next year, we should be able to verify that we have the beginnings of a global drought. We'll see.
Now, how close do you think Planet X will come to Earth?
Well, the Bible, there's no scientific data to confirm how close, because this is a future event. The only thing that we can do is, when it gets close enough, is then when we have a visual sighting, then we can plot its course. But from the biblical records, it says the next time that it passed, it would be the worst time in all of Earth's history. And there's comments in the book of Revelation and other old prophets that state, like one of the terms that it uses, that in Amos, I believe it is, that he'll turn day into night, night into day. Well, that's not an eclipse. Eclipse cannot give you daylight during the nighttime. That is talking about a 12-hour delay in the Earth's rotation. That's like saying I'll take noon and make it midnight and midnight into noon. Okay, this happened during Joshua's long day, as well as when Earth passes through the plasma tail of a comet, and we will start to slow down as we're entering into it, just like you're using a dimmer switch. Then it also states that that he sends 4 angels to stop the winds. Well, the way that winds work on Earth, is when the rotation of Earth stops, that's what causes the winds to blow. So that means the rotation of Earth will stop. And that's a 12-hour delay. As in Joshua's long day will also happen in the book of Revelation is talked about. And the Revelation goes on to state that this is the worst time in all of Earth's history. When the Earth goes into that plasma tail, it will be like a EMP wave. They'll have to shut down generators globally for about 3 days. That means no water, no sewage, nothing. Everything would be shut down. There'll be no radio communication or TV. So it's going to be the worst time in all of Earth's history.
Now,
and I think it's stating it correctly.
You believe that is because Planet X will come closer to Earth than it has in the past, and yet, from what you've told me before, around 735 BC, there is planetary evidence that it came fairly close enough to affect the Earth. Can you tell us about that?
We have evidence that 3 times in its past, Earth is tilted 26 to 28 degrees. It's like the greater force in the universe is not gravity. It's electromagnetics. The physicists are more correct in the universal model than the astronomers are. So when these two planets cross each other in a certain given distance apart, opposite poles attract. So roughly 6 hours before it reaches, it crosses Earth's path, the two planets will start to tilt toward each other, having a maximum tilt of 26 to 28 degrees. Then as it's moving away, then the planets will start to straighten out as it gets about 6 hours away from us. So those winds, you're roughly moving the surface of the Earth roughly around, I think, 1,800 miles within 6 hours. Well, if you're 90 degrees from the pivot point, you're looking at 300-mile-an-hour winds on the surface of the ocean, and in some areas that are not shielded by mountains or trees, you're looking at severe winds.
And I believe Jesus also said there will be tossing and turning of the seas. I presume that's from the tidal effect of Planet X.
Without a doubt, whenever Earth starts to tilt, the water wants to stand still as the crust is moving. So you have a huge amount of water coming inland.
Now, why is
coastlines. It says not to live along the coastlines anywhere in the world.
Now,
and
why
80% of the world population lives along coastlines and rivers.
Why is it, Gill, that the Hebrew calendar has 360 days and our modern day calendar has 365 days?
Well, globally, in all civilization, not just the Hebrew calendar, but in all civilizations at that time, this happened during Hezekiah's time. Remember where the story where he said the shadow went backwards? Well, 2 things happened there. Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees, which we can calculate, but it also got so close that it drug us outward enough to where Earth's orbit around the sun changed from 360-day year to 365.25-day year. Within that time frame of 5 years, all calendars globally had to change for 365 because you're roughly off a week per year. So once 4 to 5 years passed, you're off 1 month on your planting seasons. And a city can starve to death if they don't get their planting seasons correct. So by that time, all calendars switched. The Hebrews were one of the first to switch.
To me, Gill, that is just amazing evidence that Planet X has happened before. I mean, how could Earth go from a 360-day year to 365.25 unless it was pulled physically further away from the sun? And the only thing that could do that would be something bigger than the Earth. To me, that's just amazing evidence right there.
Well, there's this planisphere, this circular clay disc that was found in Nineveh in the library of one of the ancient kings that lived during the time of Jonah's time and Hezekiah's time. This was 40 days before Hezekiah, where Jonah is in Nineveh. Well, the royal astronomers of the king documented Jonah's account of the 40-day warning. We have a disc that shows us the layout of that sky, what constellation, and where the planets were. And it clearly marks out a comet-like object approaching. This is a clay, depiction of it. And it gives us, because of this arrangement, it gives us the exact day of February 17th, 687 BCE, which is 40 days prior to the arrival. We have 4 objects that gives us exact biblical dates that lines up with the genealogy, and it lines up with the science. It's the same model of the 150 to 152 days that the Asian astronomers, the Chinese, the Koreans, and the Japanese documented just 960 years ago. That was before a telescope. And they saw an object for 26 months. A comet can only show at maximum maybe 2.5 months. What object can you see for 26 months that's approaching in multiple constellations that it's approaching? And it has an elliptical orbit whenever we plot it out. And the gap between the entry and exit on Earth's planetary plane is roughly 152 and 1/8 day apart. That would be the modern day equivalent, the difference between a 360-day orbit of Earth and a 365.25 day orbit.
Isn't this a 5-month period also mentioned in the book of Revelation?
Yes, it says there they will wish death for 5 months before death comes. The second meteor shower, which is 5 months later, is what finishes off that half of the Earth that's described in Revelation. It describes, it says 1/3 of grass, 1/3 of trees. Later it says 1/3 of the rivers. Rivers of fresh water. They didn't have a word for continental crust, but they just described continental crust. So what half of the globe, remember, you're dealing with a spherical shape. Only half of a spherical shape can be hit by a meteor shower. So what half of the globe is 1/3 of the trees and grass and rivers? That's North and South America. It's telling us ahead of time what side of the globe is going to be hit after a 12-hour delay.
That's pretty fascinating. So what would you say in conclusion to the listeners here at the YouTube channel here at Conspiracy Corner News? Any words of encouragement or warning about the coming tribulation and Planet 7X?
The pivot point, it gives us clear information. Remember, they didn't have orbital mechanics. They didn't have the knowledge of elliptical orbits of planets. They just document what they saw. But this fits. Remember what science is when pertaining to astronomy. If you can take observed phenomena, bring it to the laboratory, show it that it's repeatable in software, basically, that's science. These people qualify. The Bible stories qualify as science because we can build a model that perfectly matches that story, and it's the same model in each one of these events. Same model that matches the Chinese records. The same model that matches where NASA sent the Pioneer and Voyager probes. We have a real object that is what's affecting the Earth at present. Our magnetic north is moving at 12 times its normal rate. Earth is tilted by an extra 4 degrees in the summertime, which is around July. And guess what? When you tilt in that direction, which way is that? That's tilting south of the universe, exactly where the pull is coming from. South of the universe is where Sagittarius is. all of the data, all scientific data, all white paper reports are all lining up with the object coming out of Sagittarius and exiting in the month of March, April. This September event has nothing to do with the scientific data or the biblical data. It's a misinterpretation they're doing.
So what are they going to say come Saturday, come Sunday, when nothing happens? What do you think they're going to say?
Well, remember, you can pick almost any day and look anywhere in the world and find some sort of disaster, because that's how prevalent it is right now. On either tidal waves, earthquakes, you name it. We're almost all the charts in natural disaster are off. It's the highest that's ever been because of the approach of this planet. But I can guarantee you one thing: there will not be a planet in this September. No. And if it does show up, you got to look at Sagittarius, not Virgo. And if it does show, it'll be like a star. It won't even have the capability to give you an eclipse. Nowhere near it. This is not what they claim it to be as CO6. You have to have CO3, 4, and 5 to happen before that. CO3 is economic collapse. CO4 is war in Western nations, basically. You're looking at probably terrorism. And then you're looking at a peace agreement of some type. And then you're looking at a great falling away. Because most pastors told people that nothing bad was going to happen to them. Well, they're going through economic collapse, and they're going through terrorism and killing and everything, and shortage of food and everything, because they're not prepared for this.
Well, Gill, these
clearly give you enough data to prepare for it.
You prepared over years, I know, of painstaking time, some of these charts that I'm showing right now. Right now, the 7 seals of Revelation, they're super high resolution. You can keep zooming in. Things do not become pixelized. And people can view these and download them at your website, planet7x.net. And they're just incredible work. I have them actually here in my home. My wife says they make her have a headache if she looks at them too long because it's so intricate. But to me, I find it very fascinating. And it's great to talk with you. I appreciate your research about this, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Well, thank you, Bart, for having me. And if your viewers have any questions, just pass them on to me. I'll be more than glad to answer them.
All right. Well, thank you, Gill.
All right. Thank you, Bart. Good night. Bye-bye.
This has been Brother Bart's Conspiracy Corner News. Are you prepared for eternity? Please tell your friends, share the link, give me a YouTube thumbs up if you like this video, and thank you for your kind and generous support. Tribulation will happen, and then Christ is going to come back a third time, and then the end of the world will come. Well, here's from the Bible. I mean, it says it right here in Matthew 24. And it opens up with Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple, which is what was going to happen shortly after his life. It says, Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to him, showed him the buildings of the temple, and Jesus said to them, Do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that should not be thrown down. Now, a lot of people divide Revelation into two camps. People who believe these events have already happened, such as the destruction of Jerusalem, which was in about 70 A.D., or people who believe that these things are yet to happen. And I suggest that maybe it's both. That when one group is so adamant about one or the other, you know, a diamond is multifaceted, God is multifaceted. What if both are true at the same time? That these events were already fulfilled in the time of Jesus and then will be fulfilled again right before his second coming. Again, there are two camps. The book of Revelation is either literal or it's symbolic. Some people believe the two witnesses spoken of in Revelation event, September 23rd, 2017, where we have this apparent alignment in the sky. And we have this from Revelation 12, verses 1 and 2. It says here, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered." Now, some people believe that this is the first time this particular alignment has occurred in 7,000 years. That this is the constellation Virgo. That's when it believes the woman is referred to. And the 9 stars are the normal stars of Leo, plus 3 more, these planets. And when they align with the sun and the moon, Jupiter here, that this allegedly only happens once in 7,000 years. Now, a lot of people on the internet, and I know personally some of them who talk about this topic and various topics we'll be discussing today, I don't necessarily agree with them. And sometimes I agree with some of what they say, but not all of it, or none of it at all, or all of it. And I think when it comes to the book of Revelation, there are many people who claim to be experts, and I would say that are dead for 3.5 days, that those are literal people who are going to prophesy and be murdered, and their bodies are going to be there exactly like Revelation says. Other people think it's symbolic. It's representative of the Old Testament and the New Testament are the 2 witnesses. I say, what if it's both? I mean, it's like a sphere hanging in front of 2 people. Half of it is blue, the other half is red. The person on the blue side is totally convinced it's entirely blue. The person on the red side is totally convinced that it's red. And they keep arguing with one another when it's both. What if the things of Revelation occurred in the lifetime of the apostles and will again occur at the end? What if the book of Revelation is symbolic and literal also? And what if it's all these other things as well? Well, let's get back to Jesus' answer when he was asked about this. It said, he sat down on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus' first answer was the following: "Take heed that no one deceives you." Why is this so important? I mean, look at this. Take heed that no one deceives you. That was his answer. Greetings, friends and countrymen, and welcome to Conspiracy Corner News. This is Bart Sabrell. Conspiracy Corner News briefly highlights the week's most significant and underreported news events throughout the world, focusing on special preparation for the difficult times ahead for all mankind. And sometimes that difficulty is confusion. When mankind first got together and tried to build a tower to reach the heavens, they were confused. God dispersed them and confused their language. And if you've ever traveled around the world, it can be confusing trying to understand what someone is saying in a different language. And now within our own language, within our own culture, it is difficult to understand. In fact, all the major religions around the world seem to have division. In Judaism, you have the Orthodox and the moderates and the liberals who constantly, arguing with one another. Same thing with the Muslims. You have the Shiites and the Sunnis arguing and killing one another. A lot of the ISIS killings really aren't against Americans or Europeans or Christians. They're against each other. And then you have Christianity. You have Protestants and Catholics and many divisions of that. Well, what we're going to talk about is this upcoming event. If it isn't a personal opinion, is the more someone claims they know something about it, I would be most skeptical of them first. So I went to this one church, and it was, here's what we believe the second beast to be, the European Union. And if you don't believe that, then you're, not being unified, and we'll disfellowship you. Another church I went to, and they said, well, we believe the second beast of Revelation is the United States, but that's, our opinion at this hour, and we're open to other suggestions. To me, that was a great way of looking at it, and I would trust someone who said that more than someone who was adamant. When people say they've got it all figured out, those are the people I would be the most skeptical of. And my belief is that nothing is going to happen on September 23rd, largely because the group of people who believe that there is something going to happen on that date, they believe in something called the pre-tribulation rapture. Now, the pre-tribulation rapture is this belief that there are two second comings of Christ, which is not mentioned in the Bible, and that there's going to be some secret return of Christ where the elect people or the Christians are going to be taken away. Then the